welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. If you'd like to send us a question or an email, hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. Now out to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, D-Man. But I'm going to let Margaret take the intro to this show because it's her turn.
Oh, well, all right. Well, welcome everyone. And tonight we are talking about faces. The outer one that you present to the world and you function through, and your inner one. And that's an interesting topic simply because most of us, not all of us, do this. We create something for other people to interact with, and the inner part of you, the truer part of you, you reserve for specific people or interactions.
And I'm Michael Lyons.
You're such a pain.
You know what? You're absolutely right, though. I am a pain.
Yes, you are.
That's my inner and my outer face.
That is his inner and outer face, and he delights in this.
I do delight in this. But you're absolutely right. And the thing that it was interesting because we were thinking about this topic about an hour or two ago over dinner, and I said, well, we have to find a little graphic for the website because we always put up these awesome graphics for the website, and you really ought to go to ArtistFirst.com and Lions.htm there on ArtistFirst.com and look at these awesome graphics that we spend literally hours trying to find, or minutes, one of those two. Anyway, you should definitely look at them because this one has a very interesting quote. And basically what it's alluding to is that our inner selves, and everybody has an inner self, we don't show to anyone, or we show to a very, very, as you mentioned, a very select group of people. And I think no matter what, even to your most intimate connections, even to your most intimate relationships, there's still a part of you that you live, alone. We all live, regardless of how close we are to the person next to us, the persons who we love. We all live separate lives, and the inner us, the inner us that no one else gets to talk to except us, is exactly that. It's our true inner self that is intensely private, that is between you and perhaps between you and your creator, and that's the only person who ever gets to see, besides yourself, your inner self.
And this is true, which is the reason why I think we were created for a relationship, so that we would not continually think only about ourselves, because when that happens, it's like a dark depression or a hole you're going to be diving down in, because you're just focused only on a very small sphere, and that's just you. It's sort of, I guess the last show we did had to do with talking about being one-dimensional or all-dimensional, and it's just nothing. So being creative for relationship allows you to expand your awareness outward and be concerned with what's around you to start, and then expand.
Yes, but I think the takeaway though is that those faces that we do use in relationships are multiple layers. I mean, we said we have an inner face and an outer face, but what we have really is an inner self and many, 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 many innumerable outer selves that we show to almost every person that you meet. Gets a different aspect of the you that is really you. You have your face that you show your family. Your mom versus your dad, your friends versus your acquaintances, your strangers or people that you're trying to be your professional self, or your compassionate self, or your fun-loving self, or your devil-may-care self, or all the pieces of you that you put forward. And social media is just a hotbed of everybody's persona and everybody's outward faces that you want to convince. And it's interesting because all of us know that we're all in some way being a little bit phony in the way we present ourselves to others. And the ones we pick out that are really phonies seem to have nothing but, these kind of stories that they're telling about themselves. But
well, I think that's key right there. What is the story that you're telling yourself in that moment?
Exactly.
I mean, we say, this is the myriad of faces that are out there, but it's dictated to by who you're interacting with. Each face is as distinct, or each facet is as distinct as the person that you're interacting with. And since each person is an individual, it never is the same. And maybe that's what makes people crazy.
Well, and what you mentioned too is it's about relationships, and in essence, part of, I mean, it sounds so nefarious, or maybe sort of duplicitous, but in fact, the way we present ourselves to others in such a way that we can communicate to them, we adapt our words very. Most people will adapt their words, they'll adapt their mannerisms, they'll adapt their mode of speech to make sure that they're being understood. And generally what you're trying to do is, maybe you want to get the basics of communication down, and then you can expand that. It's all built around making that communication and that relationship. So from the sort of putting the best light on it, the best face on it. See what I did there? To put the best face on the way we put faces on ourselves, is we're doing it in order to facilitate, relationship. We're doing it to facilitate communication. But and from that point of view, it's necessary, right? Because you mentioned we're all individuals.
Right. And one thing growing up that I had noticed, there was multiple ways to look at a problem or a situation. And the language use was a bit different person to person. So because I came from a background where, an Eastern way of looking at things is not the same as the Western, is not the same as, if you are looking at a little group that is a clique or a single person who's a loner, you learn or cultivate, try to cultivate the ability to be able to say what you want to say or communicate 3 different ways. Because I just remember as a small child observing an interaction between my mother and like a salesperson. And since she was not native here, she was having trouble understanding some colloquialism. I can't remember what it was. And the woman was trying to use that as a way of almost helping her get from point A to point B, like instructions. And when my mother didn't understand, this woman repeated the exact same words, only louder. And it wasn't, you sat there and you go, well, she's not having trouble hearing you. She's having trouble understanding you. So my mom tried to, adapt it a little bit. Do you mean this? And the woman repeated it again with that one word variation that my mom suggested, but even louder. And I sat there and I went, okay, this is useless. And that's when we began that, okay, well, obviously the communication skills here aren't quite up to snuff. So doing that exercise of being able to communicate an idea in at least 3 different ways, attacking it from 3 different angles, so that there might be something for the other person to like grasp onto, and then you have a beginning of a footing to start a conversation.
Right.
But it was always interesting.
Well, and what you're talking about basically is truly is communication, but the faces, to put it back towards faces, are used as your intro almost into the communication. Picking an example, most politicians will do this. They'll say, "I'm like you," being as phony as possible because that's who they are. But what they're trying to say is, I am just like you, and I want to represent you. So what they're trying to do is put your face on, put the face on themselves that they think that you will relate to, and then that's the intro. It's that old birds of a feather. I'm like you, so that therefore I'm sort of part of your group, and then we can talk. But that, on its face, it's sort of phony, it's sort of disingenuous, but it is very useful, as you were just saying. Instead of just repeating yourself louder with the same words, what you have to do is kind of put yourself, when I make myself like you, there's 2 things that happen. One is there's an affinity, there's a certain affinity between the 2 of us. Now we see each other as more related. And there's also, I'm putting myself, my thoughts, into your perspective. So in one way, putting a face on is also putting yourself in the other person's place a little bit. And then you say, well, now I can kind of relate, So that's the kind of the good aspect of being able to be facile with the way you communicate, the words, as well as how you present yourself, Am I going to...
Well, the motivation, though, is really what turns people off.
That's the key.
Motivation, people think that they're hidden. And that's what I find fascinating, because your motivation is actually part of your interface, as well as your interface. But
ooh. See what you did there?
Stop it.
That's so awesome. Keep going. This is great, good stuff.
But that motivation is really clear to a person who really doesn't want to have anything to do with drama, or when it's a manipulator, okay? And it stinks to the high heaven. There's no other way to explain it. You're just like, oh, this is all manipulation. It's distasteful. Yeah, and it's interesting because that's exactly, there's a part of you that has revulsion for that kind of feeling of being manipulated. This person really doesn't care about me. This person just wants what I can give to them, or him, or her.
And that's very, very, very key. That, in essence, we as people, because we know we're doing it, we know other people are doing it, putting faces on. And when we think we can see their motivation, whether it's true or not, when we think that they're trying to put one over on us or get something from us, there is a revulsion, because you say, in essence, it's like a lie. It's like a deception. They're just putting this face on so that they can kind of get past, fool me into accepting them. And whether it's true or not, it evokes that kind of feeling of revulsion or sticky. It feels like, ew, this person is trying, or we perceive, like you say, the motivation. Oh, they're just trying to sell me something.
It's the same feeling you get when you see a tick stuck to you. It's trying to eat me, trying to take my blood. It's like, no.
A tick is pretty honest about it.
It's true. It's not lying about it.
Not lying about it.
But that's the feeling you feel.
You've struck on something there. Ticks, and let's just say generalizes. The animals don't do this in the same. Maybe there's some duplicity even at the level of some of the more intelligent or more sophisticated animals. But in most cases, we see as like a dog's affection as always being genuine. Yes, maybe they want the cookie, but they really do love us. And that's one of the reasons why people gravitate towards pets and animals, because they see them as not having a face on. It's like, my dog loves me unconditionally or without any motivation that's other than, it isn't trying to get something out of me or put something over on me.
Well, they are exactly who they are. They're not trying to be a cat or a horse.
Right. Well, there's an innate honesty.
Right.
Maybe it's a simplicity, and it's one of the reasons I think why people love interacting with children, because again, children don't really have a face yet. They haven't developed. Younger children, especially, haven't developed. They're very upfront with their feelings. They're upfront with with who they are. They're, to use a tired phrase, they're keeping it real all the time. So as we grow our faces, we grow our layers, we grow our ability to kind of morph our inner self and cover it up with all the outer selves that we have. We move away from that honesty, and entering into an intimate relationship with somebody is allowing them to pierce through all the outer faces and come down to close, really close to the inner face, really close, so close that maybe you don't think that there's really a separation, but there always is a little one.
Right, mostly because we are human. This is the human interface. And until you're capable of, well, I don't know. I have to take that back now that I think of it.
Okay.
There's a thought that occurred that the need to do this. I mean, we find that we do need to be able to communicate, and the tendency is to put the face on. But does it need to be so separated from your that inner face of yours? Can you be absolutely genuine without having this false persona out there? And I think that's what it means to be mature, a mature adult. You figured out that, that ain't working for me. I don't want to have any false or, it's just too jarring for me to have this dissonance, because that is an identity dissonance at that point.
Right.
And it takes a lot of energy, your own personal energy, your life force, to project that.
Yes.
And it's not worth it.
Well, and we have to stop for a moment and then explore that, because it's a wonderful, wonderful insight. There's a certain level of honesty which we have in the beginning, which we then cover up during the years that we're kind of trying to cover ourselves and hide, in essence, build that wall and spend a lot of energy kind of projecting who we think people want us to be. And then at a certain point, if you reach a level of maturity, you say, that's not worth it. It's like, take me as I am, warts and all. And you basically say, I no longer care about masking myself to make myself look like who you want me to look like. That level of maturity. And the inner dialogue, the inner dissonance is like, you know who you are. Well, to the extent that you allow yourself to know who you are, because there's even faces within the faces. So let's not go too deep, because it's like turtles all the way down. But anyway, so once we get down a few turtles, you start to realize that you have turtles inside your turtles, and the turtles are getting very fat. But getting past all the fat turtles that you have inside yourself, there's some fat turtles that you realize that aren't worth holding up, because they get the weight of the faces, the weight of all the kind of pretension. oftentimes you'll see these commercials, especially these days, because everybody is aging, where people are trying to, even though I'm 50-something, but I look like I'm 30-something, it's all that pretension of physical changes, tummy tucks and lifts and lumps and lips and ups and ups, and all the makeups and all the, this type of whitening the teeth and doing this to the hair and spray painting your bald head. And it's a lot of energy that you are wasting. In essence, you say to yourself, wow, if I devoted all the energy, or even a part of the energy that I'm wasting on trying to make other people see me differently, or that I'm young forever, just throw that all away and do something useful and something honest with my energy, something that really is about me fulfilling me versus me fulfilling what you want me to be.
Yeah, you really have to get to the end of yourself at that point. You got to get to the end of all those faces or interactions that you've had and say, this is not helping me in any way, shape, or form. I'm putting a lot of my life's energy, my breath into speaking to these people that really, at their core, don't really care if something's actually happening to me or not.
Aren't worth it.
Well, just, the whole idea of a relationship is that the two of you are interacting because it, hopefully, to the enjoyment of being together. But if it's more of a business interaction, that's a power struggle then. Okay, who's got this or who says that, and that gets divided into fields of power. Well, I'm in charge of this and you're in charge of that type of stuff. Perfectly valid interactions, especially if you're working and out there, you understand. But we're talking about relationships that satisfy that part of you that needs the interaction. And you get to a point where you're just like, well, this is just a waste. There's people wonder why am I so unhappy?
Mm.
And it's usually because there's no, in that space of your heart, you've not filled it up with any, how do I say this? A relationship, what you're actually looking for is to fill it with a love energy. And without that, you have nothing but emptiness. You could have everything, every fancy item in the world, every, big car or big house, whatever. But
all the appearances of happiness, all the appearances of success.
But that your internal state, the state that your inner self is actually looking for, peering around corners, trying to get a clue on whether or not this will bring me happiness or joy or fulfillment. That's when you've come to the end of all those faces, you got to get to the end of yourself. You can actually decide what it is you're going to keep and what it is you're saying, don't need this.
Well, and what you really have, why this is so evocative is because what we end up doing is throwing away the dross, throwing away the phony. You come to the end of yourself, and it happens, if you allow it to, it happens to everyone. Some people earlier than others. But you have these people that have these kind of existential crises, call it a midlife crisis or some other silly thing like that. But this existential crisis that they go into is almost always because they've spent a large part of their time being what they are not. And then the inner self, the self that is being neglected, the true inner self that we don't show to anybody, says, hey, none of that is helping grow you. It's actually helping weaken you. It's helping dissipate you. It's not fulfilling you. It's emptying you. You can also, you get to that perhaps at the end of your life. You get to that at a crisis point. And the interesting thing about crisis points in anyone's life, whether it's a crisis of sudden proportions, a sudden health crisis, a sudden financial crisis, whatever it is that suddenly you realize that the common thread, the true inner self that you are suffering, let's say all life is suffering, to coin a phrase, is where you reach the end of yourself right away. You say, hey, we're all being phony, but we all know the truth, that there really is a core here, a core of common humanity, that when you reach the point and you look into someone else's eyes and you say, you're suffering too. You and I can talk about this. This is real. This is face to face. This is human to human. And none of those all the pretensions drop. And where we particularly ran into this was in Sloan Kettering.
Yeah, cancer center.
In the cancer centers, and any kind of crisis like that, where when suddenly someone looks you in the eye, a very lovely, wonderful person, and says, your child has a deadly disease and may die. And all of a sudden, all the pretensions, all the things that you were planning to do tomorrow and planning to do next week and saving for college and throw them all up in the air, all the things that occupy our they're all kind of stripped down. And there's pain there, and there's a process there. But then you get into that relationship, into that space rather, and you find other people that are in the exact same or very similar circumstances, and all the pretension. You walk up to complete strangers and you have complete commonality. You can say, hey, on a really intimate level, what are you going through and what I'm going through, and we can talk about it right heart to heart, soul to soul, because we now have both been put into a space which is not normal.
Well, you've been ripped away from what is considered your normal world, and your feet are put upon an unknown path. So you have a choice right at that point. And as a parent, every parent on that ward understands, it's an internal fight, because you want to save your child, because there's a sentence hanging over their heads, and you have to act. And the doctors will tell you, you must make your decision on where we're going to go with your child. And I had seen interactions where a number of parents were talking to the doctors going, no, you tell me what we're supposed to do next. And the doctors are like, we can't do that. We can tell you what we see, what the results of the test are, what the statistics are, but you must make the decision. And more than one parent, we had discussions about how difficult this is, because part of you just wants to run screaming from the hospital.
And what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the studio for just a moment. But when we come back out on the next half hour, I think that we're going to talk about that common space. The common space that you reach there is no more faces, no more pretension.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the fourth largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
Hi, this is Pamela Foland. Check out my new book, Megan the Pet Whisperer, available at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Please visit my website, www.pamelafoland.com. You're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. Visit ArtistFirst.com. And any questions and comments you're welcome to send to DJ@ArtistFirst.com. Now back to your hosts, Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Thank you, Z-Man. And yes, you are back to the second half hour of The Soul of the Everyman. And we are talking about... What are we talking about?
The difference between the inner and the outer face, the inner and the outer you. And the interesting thing that we kind of broached near the end of the last half hour was when all of us, and we've all probably had this experience, or if we haven't had, we probably will have in some part in our lives, when all of us reach the end of ourselves, or what I really would say is when we reach the end of pretension, and something massive, something big happens to us. Whatever it might be, it could be the shared commonality of battle. It could be the sudden appearance of an illness, either in yourself or in a loved one, or people who come to the end of they don't want to be addicted anymore. It could be something like an addiction that you finally reach rock bottom. You reach the end of the end of yourself. That's really what it is to reach the end of yourself. Right. But at that point, there's still a you under all the faces. You find out that there's a you under there, and that you is hurting. And in that hurt and in that kind of nakedness of a hurting you can find other people generally who have the same either shared experience in the past or are sharing or are within this same kind of crucible at the current moment. And those types of end of self or no faces type relationships become very intimate very, very fast. Because when you are brave enough or desperate enough or at the end of yourself enough to show someone your inner face, you find something amazing and fascinating, is that the inner you is acceptable. Even your complete unique individuality as a human being talks directly to the other person's unique, complete, individual human commonality, human being, because of the fact that you are both eschewing the faces. You're both saying, well, I'm enough. Now, in truth, still there is an inner you that you don't talk to anybody with. But you get to a point where you're really close, where you're now on kind of the bleeding edge of you. You're letting someone touch your heart. They're not getting inside your heart. They're not getting inside, the you that talks only to you. But those types of relationships are precious.
Those moments are precious.
Precious and profound.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just an instant where you're speaking with someone from that heart center, and their own heart opens, and it's a beautiful, unconditional grace, love that comes through, and you don't really have to say very much.
No.
And you can share, and you share something very simple, like a hug. But it's a hug that you hold close to you for the rest of your life. Because those hugs are just reinvigorating. And you can go back to that instant, that moment when you're hurting. And know that there is one person that really loved me enough to hug me. And wasn't really too concerned about all those faces or anything else that had happened to me. It's just me. Those are so precious. Those are moments in the eternal.
Right. Exactly right. The faces are ephemeral.
Mm-hmm.
The faces are of the moment. We use them like a utility, and you toss them away, and you don't put yourself there. You just say, well, did that with this one, did that with this one, did that with this one. But when you strip all that away, and you have that instant of time, instead of these years of faces, the instant of time when you show somebody your true self, show someone your heart, and you can see their heart. At that moment, there's a bond. There's a bond which is incredibly rapid and incredibly strong. And
I think it's called the ring of truth. Your heart knows when it rings true. And that is something that I feel the heart is looking for. You know when something rings true, because it's almost as if when you hear that, you whip around to see where is that coming from.
Right.
And I need more of that.
Right.
And that's when you know whether or not your heart is being fed, because it hungers for that.
Right. Exactly. And there are other situations where we strip the faces away, and maybe it's not as traumatic as some of the situations that throw us into ourselves, like these illnesses or these existential crises. We also allow ourselves, our faces, to drop when we're at sort of the simplest form of play. When you sit down with a child and you just start moving the Legos around, or you just start digging a hole in the sand, you let your pretensions and your faces drop away. And nudists are an interesting bunch of people. Most of them are not that fun to look at, but nudists are an interesting bunch of people because what they say, the attraction of nudism is not exhibitionism in any way, shape, or form. Really, what most of the attraction is that they feel that they are themselves. They take away all these outer garments, and they just say, "This is me." All the warts and bumps and flab and everything else, and they feel a sense of freedom and connection. So that, in essence, they say, stripping away the outer. The makeup and the hair and the facade and the clothing, which all tends to give people the face that you want to show them. I'm a banker, I'm a CPA, I'm a doctor, I'm a this, I'm a that. All that being, and then instead of being a human, doing. Instead of being a human doing, you're a human. You suddenly become a human being. Just you, just the stripped down you.
The face of the doing is what you mean.
Exactly. Sorry. But the nudism, the nudist is suddenly saying, well, it's just me. You can't tell if I'm a fireman or a CPA. It's just a body on the beach. or it's just you have a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, and you're digging a hole in the sand, and you're a 50 or 60-year-old, but the two of you have reached an honest, non-face-filled moment where you're just building a sandcastle or looking at a pretty shell. Those moments too are the end of self, because you've taken yourself back to an honest, simple state. Meditation is also a way where you remove all the faces, because you go inward and you go internal, and you push away all the distractions. You push away all the things, the Buddha would say, all the things which kind of take away from the you. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to stop you there, because that's an interesting thought. Because in meditation, what you're doing is you're stilling your thought mind, that mental aspect. And that mental aspect, the thought mind, is pretty much what is doing the projecting. Mm-hmm. Putting together the persona is a mental exercise, because it's a mental construct that you're forming of you. Mm-hmm. So when you still that, it allows the inner voice, the inner you, to be able to express itself. And it doesn't always express, it mostly doesn't express in verbal communication. Mm. The expressions that come from your inner self aren't always in, how do I say this? It's not a linear form. It's usually an expression of creativity that isn't thinking in terms of time ticks. It's thinking in terms of, this looks interesting, sounds interesting, tastes interesting. This is the flow. What is the next that should be mixed together? What happens when? And you're just in this and allowing yourself to be moved by that flow of creativity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to be able to realize that outer face is a mental construct. Mm. And what we said before in a previous show was, that's a very small piece of who you actually are. Mm-hmm. And not to be caught up with the projection of the outer face, because who you actually are, your inner self, is far more vast than the projection of the outer. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is necessary to form something to communicate with, someone, and it's usually, people believe that they have to make it attractive to get the communication. But the truth of the matter is coming to who you actually are allows for the interaction that you need, not the thing that you think you want, right? But what you actually need in this moment of your life,
right? And what you're really saying is that there's the communication of the mental, the tick, 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 the facade, face, is important, and it is the way interactions begin and the way casual interactions happen and so on. When you have there's the lower level of communication. Let's say it's more honest communication, which doesn't use the tick, tick, tick.
Lower level.
Well, it's more honest. It's more central. It's more at the heart.
When you say, you mean sublime level?
Well, what I mean is that you can have a very profound communication that has almost no words and no faces and no facades and no tick, tick, tick. It's all about, my shovel is going to move this sand this way, and yours is going to come right behind it and move the sand that way, and we're going to just do something very simple together and have a real interaction and communication at a level which neither one of us needs to put a facade on. it doesn't matter that I have all these things that I can do and be, and that the other is 2 years old. No, that profound communication happens over a very simple but yet very very significant conversation, which doesn't have the tick tick tick, it doesn't have the pretension, doesn't have the words, doesn't have the
You mean, okay, so it's an interaction on a level that's multiple levels, not just a verbal. Many times when you're playing with a child, it does not need to be verbal.
No.
And that's interesting, because if you go back to that state of being where you're having your interactions be nonverbal, cultivating a language that is nonverbal with another person is a profound way of communicating.
Exactly. And I say that when you reach the end of yourself, you also reach the end of these kind of pretensions and words and tick, tick, ticks and kind of doing states, doing this, doing that, doing the other thing. And you reach a being state with the other. The relationship with the other in the being state, the meditative state, the nonverbal state is still communication, is still relationship, but it's a profound, nearly the inner self, the true you, talking right to the other person's true you. There's still a separation. We're still unique individuals. We still aren't one. But the closer we get to the one, whether it's in meditation, one with the spirit, one with all, one with the universe's energy, one with God, or one with another, through some very simple interaction, the profound level, the level of significance rises and rises and rises. And so it can be a very small amount of time, because time doesn't matter. It can be a very small amount of actual, interaction at a physical level, but the significance is vast. You can change your whole life with something like offering a cup of water to someone who is thirsty and near death. And you just say, I recognize your humanity. Mother Teresa, I recognize your humanity. I don't care that you are, quote unquote, an untouchable dying in the streets of Calcutta. No, I recognize your humanity. I care for you. I love you on the level of a human to a human. And yes, you may pass away in the next 10 seconds or the next 10 minutes, but the interaction has occurred.
It is what life is, where you meet a person at a level and the understanding is right there. I see you as you are, and still reach out for whatever reason, whatever purpose. And that simple interaction of being able to look into another person's eyes and recognize that I see you is exceedingly profound. It is the first thing that a child looks for. And it is a need that we all have. It drives us all because we want someone to acknowledge that we're here and we matter in that moment. I mean, frankly, when you get that kind of acknowledgement very deep, the rest of the world falls away. You don't need to have anything else.
Doesn't matter.
To be acknowledged on that level is a profound gift. And it's something that most people do not cultivate. They are continually being bound up into concepts of who they are in this moment. If I'm a teacher, then I have all my students and, I'm supposed to be teaching this or that or the other thing. But even thinking back to your own experiences at school or college or whatever, the teachers that were impactful were the ones that were able to meet you right there and introduce something that they felt that you didn't understand or see. Gave you something to contemplate, to chew on. And they realized that there's something in you that they acknowledge. Those are the ones that truly teach.
Right. And those are the types of interactions that become significant, that you remember for the rest of your life, or many, many, many years later. The interesting thing about it is, though, so we have these faces and these facades and these phony things and all the turtles that we have to keep in the air all the time, these fat turtles. But why don't people interact at the heart level all the time? I pose the question, but I think I'll also postulate an answer. I believe that why we aren't always in that state of kind of showing people our true inner selves and looking for the echo back is that it does take courage, because in exposing your inner self in those interactions, you are also making yourself vulnerable. You are stripping away. The facades are also armor. They're also the way that we hide, we protect, we distance ourselves. We make things that might hurt us farther away because they're only dealing with that piece of us. We were seeing that show that we were seeing the other day, where in essence the people that were on the show were using a piece of themselves, a phony facade, something they gave a different name, a persona, as protective armor to kind of keep themselves safe behind that, behind this kind of persona.
And I want to bring that up as well, because that particular show was dealing with people in the sex industry, women, who wanted to get out of it, and they were, they're damaged. They're internally damaged. They don't feel that they had no respect for themselves because of what they did. But then again, they also knew that they needed to, this is how they felt they had to make a living. So what was fascinating was they did an exercise where there was this figure of a woman, just a cutout outline, and they were asked to put their feelings, their name, and the feelings they had for this person up on that cardboard. And what was good about this persona and what they didn't like about the persona. And then they were to basically acknowledge and thank, this kept me away, this piece of me kept that nasty outer world away from this other inner piece of me. And that's something that I feel, just speaking as a woman, I've seen myself and other women do this in terms of you put something out there to protect yourself because it's going to be a nasty interaction in some way, shape, or form. The feeling, that tick feeling, that something is going to try to take your life's blood, and you can't get out of it. So you make this shield, if you would, to protect the important part of you, your heart. You're trying your best. You're thinking that this is the only way I'm going to be able to protect myself. But the truth is, you can't be split apart like that for long. This will poison you. Because it's the concept of being separate.
Right. And the dissonance, of course, is that, in that particular case and in many other cases, sometimes these personas are to separate what is in essence trauma or physical abuse, or in this case, sort of a traumatizing experience. and it's not just women, of course. Human beings in general, we use personas many ways, and one of the ways people use them is that they allow all the damage from a traumatic experience to kind of impact on the outside, and think that it isn't going to affect the inside. But it does affect both. And when you rip yourself apart like that, in that case, the persona also inflicts damage over time. But that, that's a topic for another show where we can talk about how when you do, in essence, instead of a persona being just a face, it's really ripping a part of you out and saying, well, that part of me is going to be the part that fights and defends and takes the damage, but it's still so much of you. It's a living piece of you. You actually have taken a chunk of the real you and put it out there. And when we talk about the inner us, it's not always a whole. Sometimes it's the inner us that's been torn apart. And there are pieces of the inner us that are taking damage and taking hits and trying to preserve the inner. And that's a preservation, a self-preservation mechanism that causes, mental and physical damage and trauma later. And you can see it in when we were in the cancer wards, there were people who took tremendous damage by trying to maintain their persona outside and not and deny the damage that was happening inside.
Yeah, too long.
You have to, when you reach the end of self, you also say that even though the damage is coming in, I'm just going to take it. I'm going to deal with it as best I can with the whole of me, not tear myself apart to say, well, this part will be in the fire and this part will be behind and safe. Yes, it feels like it's good, but at the end of the day, you have to bring them back together, and all that damage is going to come back.
It's still you. It's only a concept that you've done, mental, but it's still you. And when you realize that again is coming to the end of yourself. You realize that no, this isn't working. I'm still hurt, and it's still going to hurt. I can't just chop off a piece of me.
Yeah.
And offer it to the gods and say, okay, that's it. It's like, no.
Like the wolves.
Yeah, this is still me. And I can't allow this to continue for the sake of my life. I can't allow this. And you saw that in Sloan because it was for the sake of the one that you love, and you would gladly give your life. You basically would try. I saw many mothers trying to figure a way to function in the midst of this madness. And it takes a tremendous toll. And I still remember a couple of moms were having a discussion of how long the battles have been. And the battles, one of them was like 10 years battling it. And she was just ripped to shreds. So difficult.
Yeah, and in this case, that's those faces are more than just facades. Those are pieces of you that are taking damage. But unfortunately, we've reached the end of this phase of the soul of the Everyman, and we're gonna have to close this phase and say, thank you very much for listening. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And have a good evening.